most dominant NBA playoff runs we've seen, because I would look at the Celtics as more of a complete team where Brown and Tatum can get hot. They can go nuclear, but I feel like if you're comparing them to like Steph and Kevin Durant, they're way more efficient in those finals and a lot more explosive, even to a certain extent, Kobe and Shaq with the way they were able to dominate. But they were able to put together a perfect team, and we were talking about it all offseason. As soon as Jrue Holiday was traded from the Bucks, we're like, just watch Brad Stevens go ahead and scoop him up, and then we get rid of team spokesman Marcus Smart with the biggest maybe addition by subtraction in NBA history, where you allow Jason and Jalen to be the vocal leaders on that team, and then you also have the calming presence of Al Horford there still. But Drew Holiday is almost like if Al Horford was a guard in a sense, where he's kind of a Swiss Army knife, similar to just a player who maybe he's not going to get you 30 every night, but he'll go ahead and he's a guard who'll get you 10 rebounds. He's going to go out there. Maybe he'll get 11 assists on a given night. And then he's also extremely efficient in the series and started out game five, kind of firing on all cylinders and really set the tone for the Celtics team and gave them probably the mentality that they had been missing. So instead of Marcus Smart jacking up three straight threes or driving into traffic and turning the ball over in a game five, being able to give the Mavericks momentum, you had Drew Holiday, who actually has ball handling skills, was able to get into the lane, get some layups, and really set the tone for the game.
Yeah, and not only that, with Drew Holiday, getting all these offensive rebounds, getting the rebounds on the other end. Game four was kind of a disaster for the Celtics. They got blown out. Worst finals loss in NBA history for a team that wins the finals, but they went bounce back. Drew Holiday set the tone for them. Derek White makes some huge shots for him, and then Tatum had a great game. And then Jalen Brown, who ends up being the Finals MVP, most consistent player in that Finals. Guy who really set the tone, made some really clutch shots for them when the momentum was shifting, and played on both sides of the ball. He guarded Luka. He tired him out, whether it was him or Kyrie. Just setting the tone on defense, and then also facilitating, making big shots when it mattered. So Jalen Brown did great. And then Tatum, got to give him some effort here as well. I mean, he had some games where he had some poor shooting performances, but otherwise, defensively, a masterclass. And then in game five, having 11 assists, 30 points, fifth player to do that in NBA history. He's in conversations with Kobe, with LeBron, with Michael Jordan. So great company there, but just finally getting over the top. And it shows in the NBA what's most important. And I feel like what we're finally seeing here is patience is key. Took 8 years. They made a finals. They made multiple conference finals. Didn't get over the hump, but they got those final pieces, Porzingis and Drew Holiday, and what culminates ultimately in their NBA title. And now, East, who knows what it'll look like the rest of the years.
Yeah, and I think they definitely stack up really well against the other teams in the East. And honestly, I thought Indiana pushed the Celtics a lot more than the Dallas Mavericks, because Indiana, what they did was, okay, maybe we can't score against them in their half court set, but what we can do is play as fast as possible. They're one of the best offenses in the league this year, and they're number one in pace. Where I feel like Luca, sometimes he slowed the game down when Kyrie Irving would struggle to get going. Do you think part of the reason the Mavericks struggled, where Luca isn't a LeBron, where sometimes he knows how to push it and then sometimes he knows when to just pound the ball into the ground? And it seemed like Luca didn't know when to just let Kyrie go in the finals, and he kept trying to take shots. He kept slowing the game down, and you saw Kyrie Irving really couldn't get a rhythm at all.
Yeah, I think especially game five is where it was the most paramount because you'd have tough shooting performances from Kyrie, and then Luca, he would get tired. He would take some bad shots, and we saw that especially in game five, where ultimately they just couldn't really get a rhythm going. Kyrie is somebody who I think will need to take over at certain points in the game, and we saw that throughout the playoffs, but in the finals, just ultimately just couldn't get the rhythm going.
Yeah, don't you think it's so bizarre though with the Celtics themselves as a team, where so many people were picking against them, so many people didn't even give them a chance. You had specific people out there picking the Dallas Mavericks to win in 5, when he was basically talking about, okay, Mavericks are going to win in 5 because the Celtics won't be able to adjust to their style of play, where there's not really a style of play. It's just Luka dribbles the ball up the court, and the Celtics decided early, okay, we're gonna make him score. We're gonna take away all of your other options, and then we're gonna put Jalen Brown on him, Jrue Holiday, Derek White, and all these great defenders, and just tire him out and not double team him to give them wide open threes.
Yeah, and what we would see is we'd have games where first half he scores 25, 30 points. In the second half, you're seeing him score 7 points. He shoots maybe 30% from the field with a bunch of turnovers. So the first half he'd if you could kept them competitive, but second half of the series you saw oftentimes by the time the fourth quarter came, he was just gassed and just couldn't get anything going.
Yeah, and do you think this was more of a situation where the media overstated maybe how good the West was? Or do you think it was more of the situation where the Mavericks were actually that good in the West? They were a Titan that people thought was going to take down the Celtics, where you had 89% of the money on the Dallas Mavericks. However, the Boston Celtics pretty much dominated them in every single game, but one in the game that they lost, you could tell that they wanted to win it in Boston, and you could tell that they weren't really trying that hard.
Yeah, I think it's tough because the Mavericks were a great team, and I think that they'll be. I don't know if they'll make the finals next year, but I think they'll at least be competitive. They could probably get some better role players, players who can play defense. But overall, I think they going through the gauntlet of the Western Conference. I think by the time they got to the finals was tough. But for the Celtics, like if we talk about them, everyone talks about how easy their run to the finals was, but at the same time, like who else could they have really gone through? Like the Bucks, they would have been able to take care of the Bucks. And then the Heat with Jimmy Butler, like I don't think Jimmy Butler probably takes a game or two off of them, but I don't think ultimately the Heat overcome the Celtics. Like Celtics had the best runs. Part of it was luck, and the other part of it was they were the best team throughout the entire year. They're the only team that won 60 games all year.
Yeah, they're the only team. They're clearly the best team all season, and it was a year where Denver kind of struggled because they're really missing, I don't know, a bench. They lost Bruce Brown, they lost Jeff Green, who are pretty pivotal in that finals run there, and then everyone was anointing Anthony Edwards as better than Jason Tatum, better than Jalen Brown, where it's like, no, I don't really think that's the case. He's just really the only scorer on his team, so he's going to get touches. I think if Jalen Brown was in the same position, he would also be getting 30 to 40 points a night if he was the sole scorer on that team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's time that we give Jalen Brown the respect that he deserves because there were parts of the playoffs where Jalen Brown was the best player on their team. And I think it's safe to say that they're both 1A and 1B. Whether you want to say Tatum is better or not, I think Tatum definitely deserves that crown. But ultimately, what I think helped the Celtics get to this final level was them both agreeing to be both 1A and 1B. One person takes over, the other person takes over, and they play together. But ultimately, it's all about the team win. And I think Jalen Brown deserves to be in that conversation for top 15 player in the league now because of how he performed in these playoffs.
Yeah, and he was kind of on a mission ever since he found out he got snubbed from the All NBA team, and a lot of people are scratching their heads and they're like, "Oh, do you like put him over Devin Booker? Like, do you put him over this guy?" However, like defensively, I feel like he has much more of an impact than Devin Booker does on the court. And then he goes out there and he wins the Larry Bird Trophy in the East, and then in the finals he goes out there and wins the MVP. But it's not necessarily a detriment on Tatum because all you have to do is look at who the best defender is guarding on the Celtics, and it is Jason Tatum. That's the reason why he can go out there and get 11 assists. That's why he had 13 assists in a game. That's why he had his first career triple double and continued to build on that throughout the playoffs in the first game versus the Miami Heat.
Yeah, no, Tatum, the way he's been able to evolve as a playmaker has been exceptional. We saw that with the 11 assist closeout game in the finals. We saw that with the 30-point triple double. So, I mean, Tatum definitely deserves that echelons there. But I do think Jalen Brown deserves his respect in the NBA circle because he's not like a Robin sidekick sort of figure. I think they complement each other's game really well, better than they did in years past.
Yeah, definitely better than years past because you can tell that Jalen Brown specifically worked on his post game this offseason. He was number one in turnaround jump shots in the post this year. And then he also worked on his ball handling, and it feels like he bulked up. And this was the point where he hit his prime officially. And you can tell he's a lot stronger than he was other years. He's finishing a lot better, and he's not having those egregious mistakes. He still has some times where you're like, what are you doing there? But at the same time, he's not making them time and time and time again in a row. There's a much better flow to this team because really Joe Mazzulla's message is we need to get the best shot possible. And if we drive and kick once, it's not there. Keep driving, keep kicking. And they do all of this with Kristaps Porzingis pretty much being hurt the entirety of the playoffs. And a lot of people were putting the Celtics finals chances on Kristaps Porzingis playing. But the thing is, if you're gonna trade for a 7'3" player that has an injury history, typically that doesn't get better. So I always saw Porzingis as more of a luxury for the Celtics than a actual necessity that you're putting your championship hopes on because he's just been way too fragile in the past to actually think that he could be a key piece on a championship team for an entire playoff run.